Hey there, Oliver. Thanks for coming to the interview today. Hey, no problem. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview with you. Let's just get started with some basic questions. What is a transistor? Howdy there. My name is Oliver, and this is Not My Car. What I'm going to be talking about today is that time that I interviewed for Intel and then completely bombed it. So get ready to make fun of me in the comments. So this is how the story begins. It's winter term. I'm sitting at home thinking to myself, gee, I could really use a full-time internship next year because if I have to do another year of school, I will absolutely expire. And if you're not in your third year of engineering yet, just wait, you'll see what I mean. Doing 4 years of engineering in a row is a great way to lose all of your sanity very quickly. So it's early January and I start applying to jobs, and I tell myself that I'm gonna apply to 100 jobs in 100 days, and I'm gonna keep applying until I get a job. Thus began the endless hunt for a job. I went to my career advisors like 5 times to get my resumes and cover letters fixed. So I was literally applying to anything I felt I had the slightest chance of actually getting a job at. Anything from like web development to civil engineering, and I'm not even a civil engineer, but I just wanted any job so badly that I was literally applying to anything I felt like I had a smidgen of prior experience doing. And then almost all at once, around February, I got 4 interviews for 4 different jobs. It must have been some change that I made to my cover letter or resume at the time because this was completely unexpected. And as I'm sure you could guess, one of the companies that I got an interview with was in fact Intel. So naturally, as one does when you're preparing for a job interview, you go back and look at the job posting to see exactly which skills match up with the things that they want. And luckily for us, I actually saved the job posting because I was going to make a video about applying to 100 jobs in 100 days. But luckily somebody else hired me before I had to go through that hell. So looking at the job posting, this is kind of where some red flags should start to come up. I did remember applying to Intel, but the job posting didn't really clarify things for me at all. In the first sentence, it says Intel is looking for qualified candidates to join the AMS IP Engineering Solutions team. So if you're like me, you have no idea what any of this meant, so you have to do some Googling. And after typing in some queries, the only things that I found coming up were people's LinkedIn pages, and luckily for me, there was one guy who happened to work at Intel who broke it down for me, and AMS stands for Analog Mixed Signal. So based on the things that I've been learning, Analog Mixed Signal kind of sounded like a hardware engineering job to me, but I decided to do a little more research. After figuring out what AMS was, I needed to figure out what IP meant, because the only IP I know of is an internet provider. So after doing a few more Google searches, I came across what IP was for semiconductor devices, and it stands for Intellectual Property, more specifically, reusable units of logic design or layout that can be licensed and used in different chip designs. Now, to some of you, this still might be complete gibberish, but to me, I think it's starting to make a little bit of sense. Basically, on an integrated circuit device such as this one, there are lots of little chips on there, and the intellectual property for these chips is probably created by a company like Intel or AMD or a similar manufacturer. So now I'm thinking that my job might be to design the RAM or the EEPROM or the CPU and design some of the logic connections for these devices. Which, again, to me, sounds like hardware engineering design, and I'll tell you why that's important later. And I thought I was pretty lucky here because I had just been taking a course on Verilog where we were doing some of this integrated circuit design. So at this point, I thought I had it figured out, so I kind of disregarded analyzing the rest of the job posting with as much detail. But with the power of hindsight, if you read the next few sections, key responsibilities include the development of custom scripts, flows, and tools to increase productivity and quality of analog digital front-end and back-end design. Candidate will work closely with design engineers to help them work more efficiently through scripting and troubleshooting. Candidate will gain experience and contribute to design enhancements, automation, and support for simulation, verification, extraction, and reliability. So it's a little more obvious from reading these next few sentences that this job is actually more of a scripting/software engineering job rather than a hardware engineering job, like I thought it was. And the part of the job posting that really gives this away is the qualification section. They talk a lot about scripting and Unix and different languages that you should know. But then they sprinkle in some electrical circuits and semiconductors, and in the preferred qualification section, they also include analog custom layout / design experience. So now I'm just extremely confused. But I decided to lean on the fact that I've done quite a bit of semiconductor work and analog devices in kind of a hardware manner, so I figured, hey, may as well try and use that to my advantage. So the first interview comes around, and it actually went pretty well. I got asked a lot of the basic questions, the tell us about yourself, why do you want to work here, and some questions about web development, and then the final question I got asked was, how would you collect the first 10 search results from a Google query? Something about a hockey game, I don't exactly remember. But luckily for me, just the week before I had been developing a web scraping device, so I literally knew step by step exactly what I needed to do, and I think this really impressed them, which is why they decided to bring me back for round 2. But little did they know that I still had absolutely no clue what this job was about. Now, if you were smart, you probably would have asked them at the end of the first interview, or even at the start of the second interview, to clarify exactly what you would be doing in this job if you were to be hired. Now, that's a reasonable question to ask, but no, I just decided that I already knew everything. So for the second interview, I began to practice lots of logic questions, like how to build an OR gate out of NAND gates, the difference between a task and a function, the difference between double equals and triple equals, what is a PLI, and a bunch of other questions relating to hardware design. So with all this preparation and skipping the classes, I felt that I was really prepared for this interview. I also knew at this point that I was only competing with 3 other people because there were only 4 interview slots, so I figured I had a pretty good shot. So I hop on the Microsoft Teams call with them and the interview begins. The absolute first question I get asked is probably the most basic question that any engineer should know if they're looking into semiconductor devices. What is a transistor? My brain completely froze on me. I could not think of the answer for the life of me. The panic ensued, I was sweating profusely, I probably turned red like a tomato, and the thing is, it's not even that hard of a question. I probably could have just said that it's a basic building block of every semiconductor device out there, and they probably would have accepted that answer. But no, I decided to come up with some long rambly answer, and at the end of it said you can use a transistor as a switch, which isn't technically wrong, but it's definitely not a good way to answer the question. And after I answered this question, the interviewer was like, okay. Literally like that. I was like, oh shit, like this is not good. So as you can imagine, this was not a great place to start the interview, and it kind of set the stage for the rest of the interview, which would be a complete train wreck. The next question was, what's the difference between a list, an array, and a hash table? And I feel like I actually answered this one pretty well. I did give a bit of a long-winded answer, but eventually I got my point across pretty well. Then question number 3 was another super basic question. It's a question that everybody, when you're going into an interview, should prepare for. What are your greatest weaknesses and strengths? So I immediately begin to think to myself, shit, because guess what? I didn't prepare for this question. How did I manage to do that? I have absolutely no idea. I literally prepared for every other type of behavioral question except for this one, and of course this is the one that I get asked. Now, even if I didn't prepare for it, it feels like something you should still just know the answer to, right? Well, not necessarily. So I begin talking about my strengths, and I ramble on for a minute, and I dive into this story about how I biked through the rain to a 5-kilometer race, and then I ran the race and it was the fastest time, and I ended up basically doing a triathlon because I was biking and it was raining, and my bike was like 30 kilometers there, 30 kilometers back, and I still ran my fastest time, and I was like, perseverance, that's my strength. So the strengths answer was like kind of okay, it was a bit long-winded, but the problem with using this particular story was that I had planned to use this story for a question, tell us about a time that you faced a challenge and overcame it, or that type of question, which I think I did end up getting at the end of the interview, and then I completely butchered it because I already used up my story on this stupid question. And then comes the absolute kicker of the interview. What are my greatest weaknesses? You know what I said to the guy? I said my greatest weakness was telling long and rambling stories and not getting to the fucking point. I'm not kidding you. I actually said that, and oh my god. After that, it was over. I just knew, like, man, like, I may as well just get up and leave now. I mean, you can't exactly get up and leave because it was a Zoom call, but it was brutal. So I'm going to save you the embarrassment for the rest of the questions of the interview, but I'll tell you one thing. At the end of the interview, I finally decided to come to my senses, and ask what IP stood for and what the job was about. And it turns out, as speculated in hindsight, this was not the hardware engineering job that I thought it was. It was just a plain old software engineering job with troubleshooting, writing some scripts, and these things would eventually make their way onto the hardware that people would use. So there you go. That's the story of my interview with Intel, and what have I learned from this? Well, first and most importantly, I think it doesn't really matter that I bombed one interview. People have off days, and I just wasn't on point that day, and I really cracked under pressure. So there's no point in feeling bad about it. Plus, I ended up getting a job that I'm really happy with anyway, so it all worked out in the end. There's always going to be other job opportunities, and you can reapply to the same position next year since you know exactly what you did wrong. Another extremely important thing I learned from this interview is that it's extremely important to ask for clarification and don't move forward until you understand exactly what it is you're doing and what the interviewer expects from you. I'm sure there's lots of other lessons you could take away from this, like don't be an idiot and make sure you prepare every type of behavioral question because they will ask you the one you didn't prepare for. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you had as much fun watching it as I did making it. I had a lot of fun just recording this. If you liked the video, be sure to leave me a like. It'll help show it to other people and boost that algorithm. Also, follow me on Instagram at Oliver Foote, and if you really like my stuff, then subscribe and stick around for more. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Whoosh.